Super Smash Bros. Ultimate represents a series and fighter's history in many ways, whether it be their moveset, music, stages, items, or what we're going to talk about today, being their alternate costumes. These are basically different colors, or for the lucky few, model swaps, that change their appearance of the fighter to make them stand out when having multiple of that same fighter in one match. Every character has 8 costumes, including their default appearance. I've always loved the idea of alternate costumes, and listening to about where their origins come from is just so fun. However, these costumes can range in quality from absolutely amazing to just terrible. So today, I'm going to be going over the best and worst alternate costumes for each character in my opinion, and I can't stress that enough. This is my opinion, and it's okay to hate one I love or love one I hate. Please keep that in mind. My opinion is not the objectively correct one. But anyways, how will I be deciding which is the best or worst for each character? I have 3 main factors. First, I consider if that character looks good in it or not, as if it's ugly, it's probably not going to be winning best. Factor 2 is their origin. If a costume has a really good origin, it might just help it win, but if its origin is kinda weak or non-existent, then it may be in the worst category. Keep in mind though that there are a few here that I have under best, despite them not having an origin, just because I like how it looks. Just keep that in mind. I'll be using the Smash Bros. Wiki for each character's origin, and a link to that is in the description. Finally, how similar it is to the default color or a normal costume will also be a factor. Believe it or not, there are quite a few characters that have alternate costumes that basically don't change much of the appearance from the default costume. Those will most likely end up in the worst category. Also, sometimes the reason won't be very in-depth for some of these, so expect them to maybe just even be one-sentence explanations. I'll also make sure to say if the costume I picked for the worst is still a good costume, as many of the characters only have good costumes, meaning I had to choose one for the worst. In this video, I'm also going to cover which 5 characters I believe have the best overall costumes and the worst overall costumes at the end, with a little help from a poll I had you all take earlier. Before we start though, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like and maybe even subscribe, because only about 10% of my viewers are subscribed to the channel, so it would be much appreciated. But with that being said, let's jump into the best and worst costumes for each character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So I think the best way to split this video up is into 12 categories I've created, being Smash 64 fighters, Smash 64 Unlockables, Melee newcomers, Melee clones, Brawl newcomers, Brawl Unlockables, Smash 4 newcomers, Smash 4 Unlockables, Smash 4 DLC fighters, Smash Ultimate newcomers, Echo fighters, and Smash Ultimate DLC fighters. So starting us off here, we have the original 8 from Smash 64. We have the main man himself, Mario, who got a very good deal out of his alternate costumes. Mario looks good in pretty much everything, but if we have to choose a best, it's going to have to be between the wedding outfit or builder outfit, since they both change Mario's model and aren't just simple recolors. Costumes like that will have a higher chance of being best, by the way, because they take more effort and are generally better references. Out of these two, I think I'm going to have to go with Builder Mario. Odyssey is my favorite game of all time, but I love how Mario looks in his builder design a little bit better. Plus, Cappy is already in Mario's moveset, so Mario Maker representation with this costume works perfectly. As for his worst, I chose the green one. It's still a pretty good costume, as all of Mario's costumes are pretty good. It's just not as good as the other ones. However, I would still argue it's a great costume. Next up is Donkey Kong. I chose his white outfit for his best, since I like how white looks on a lot of these characters, and you'll see that that's a pretty consistent theme with quite a few of these. As for his worst though, I was originally going to pick this red one since it's a bit too similar to his default one. However, its reference is really good, being similar to the original Donkey Kong on the arcade. I decided to go with the green one instead, which I think is okay, but it's gotta be the worst if we're excluding the red one. I feel though it would have been really cool if the red alt made DK lose his tie though, which would have made it just the best alt out of all of them for sure. Link's best one without a doubt is Fierce Deity Link. Majora's Mask is by far my favorite Zelda game, and this is just a great homage to it. His worst one though is probably this teal one, only because it's a bit too similar to his Tunic of the Wild. It's still an okay alt though. It's in reference to Twilight Princess Link, which used to be the main Link in Smash. Samus's best is her black alt, just because it looks really cool, and her worst one is pink because it looks a bit less cool, but it's still alright. See what I mean by some of these not really having a great explanation? Anyways, Yoshi's best one is the blue one, since I like how the blue Yoshis work in Super Mario World, where if they eat a shell, they're able to fly. Plus, blue looks really good on Yoshi. The worst one, though, is Crafted Yoshi. I have a strong hatred for this costume because it looks kinda ugly, and is a bit too similar to his default costume. The only real thing saving this costume is its origin, but even then, I think Yarn Yoshi would have been a lot better. But worst of all, it replaced Yoshi's by far best costume, Black Yoshi. This may be one of my least favorite costumes in the whole game, just because it killed my boy Black Yoshi. Anyways, rant over about Yoshi. This next one might be a bit controversial, but honestly I like Kirby's default appearance best. I'm not quite sure why, but Kirby just looks the best in his natural colors. His worst one was hard to come up with since, like Mario, Kirby has some pretty good ones all around. But if I had to choose, I'm going to go with this red one. It's in my opinion just a worse version of the orange one here. Still though, red is a good alt, it's just Kirby's worst. Fox's best is orange because I think it looks good on him, and his worst is white since it's the only one without origin. Still a good alt though. Pikachu's best is Pikachu Libre in my opinion, since it's a very iconic Pikachu version, and it's the most different and looks the best. Pikachu's worst though is probably this one based off of Sun and Moon, since I never really liked that generation all too much compared to the other ones, so yeah, that's why it's its worst one. Alrighty, on to the Unlockables for 64, we have Luigi. His best has to be the one repping our boy Waluigi. You'll join Smash one day, my brother. As for his worst though, I don't really like how this dark green and blue one looks on him. It's not terrible, it's just not the best color combo in my opinion. Ness's best has to be Mr. Saturn, with it probably being the most popular part from Mother aside from the protagonists themselves. His worst is his green one since it's just a bit underwhelming compared to the other ones. It doesn't have any special designs like a few of them, and is just kinda lame color-wise. Some of Captain Falcon's alts are super legendary, and I have to go with the pink and white one here just because it looks so good. His worst one though has to be the blue one, even though it's still okay, it's just a bit too similar to his default appearance. Our final Smash 64 character is Jigglypuff, and her best has to be the Sleepy Hat, which is based off Kirby's sleep ability. This is super cute as these two similar designs make them often compared despite being from different franchises, and the Sleepy Hat just fits Jigglypuff's ability so well. Jigglypuff's worst though is probably her default one, which is something you won't see very often here. Every single one of her hats adds so much personality that even though the default one is still good, the other ones are just so great that it outshines it. Okay, on to the next game in the franchise, Melee, with its starting roster. Up first is Princess Peach. Her fire alternate costume is by far her best in my opinion. I like how pretty much all the Mario characters look with fire flowers, but this costume is also a double reference to not only her with a fire flower from 3D World, but also her original appearance in Super Mario Bros., which is really cool. There aren't many costumes with two references behind them. Her worst is gold though, because it just doesn't look good on her, and it's also the only one besides the black one to not have an origin, but at least the black one looks pretty good. I think Bowser's best is going to be his green one, since it follows Bowser's earlier color scheme, which is a really good reference, and it also just looks good. His worst is probably the one with the pink hair, since it barely changes anything at all. Ice Climbers, in my opinion, have some pretty mediocre costumes, so this was a bit tricky. I think their best one is this white one, since they look great in that color scheme, and their gloves also match their original colors, which is a really neat detail. Their indigo one is pretty underwhelming, all things considered, and it's a bit worse of a version than the white one here, so that makes it their worst one. Sheik's black one looks very good on her, especially with her whole ninja aesthetic. I was honestly really split on her worst one though, between her blue or yellow. The blue one is a bit too similar to the original, and yellow just doesn't look that great. However, since the blue one has a much stronger origin, being based on Sheik's original design from Ocarina of Time, I decided yellow was worse. Zelda's best is once again dark, because it looks really nice, and the worst is probably the violet one, since it's way too close to her normal appearance. It's in reference to Zelda from Ocarina of Time, although they probably could have gone a bit further with the reference here, so I think it's definitely her worst one. Skipping a few characters for the unlockable non-clones, we have Marth, with his best being gold. I like how a lot of Fire Emblem characters look in gold, but as for his worst, it has to be this one, as it's way too close to his default one. Like, it's probably even hard for you to tell that this isn't the default one at all. Like, I sure was surprised that this is even a different costume when I first saw it. Mewtwo's best one is this black one, as it changes him up way more than any of the other costumes, and it looks really nice on him with the colors. His worst one though is the pink one, as like I said for the last two, it's a bit too similar to his default look. For our final non-clone from Melee, we have Mr. Game & Watch, where I feel like his white alt is best. His worst is definitely this blue one. He has so many blue alts for some reason, even though Game & Watch could literally work with any color. But they decided to make 3 blue ones, not 2, 3. Anyways, I think this one is the worst of the 3. Alright, onto the clones. Dr. Mario's best alt has to be the black one. It's by far the best one, as he looks really good in these colors, and its origin is hilarious, being based off of an unlicensed doctor, which is just the best. His worst is probably this purple one, since it doesn't really have an origin, and it's a bit too close to his pink one, which is based on Nurse Toadstool. Pichu's best is Spiky-Eared Pichu, solely due to me loving this reference. Spiky-Eared Pichu is a special event Pokemon that would not just be a recolor, but its own unique sprite, and I've always loved this Pokemon alteration, and it makes me really happy it's in Smash. Like Jigglypuff, I think Pichu's worst one has to be his default, just because all of the other ones give him too much personality. For the funny taunt man,
hands off my
Big Chungus for PlayStation 4.
His best has to be the black one, as it's the most significant change, and it's so cool visually. Like Fox, I chose his white one as it's the only one without an origin, and is a bit less good than the others. It's still pretty decent though. My favorite Young Link one has to be the white one, as I just love how he looks in these colors. Cyan is probably his worst one, since he already has a dark blue alt, and technically his white one is sorta bluish. The origin is also pretty weak, being based on Breath of the Wild Link, who's already a fighter in the game. It's still good, just a bit less so, in my opinion. Ganon's has to be his light blue one, since it completely changes him up and makes him look really cool. I always referred to him as the Ice King. Ganon's worst is Violet, for being once again too similar to the original. For our final character, Roy, his best is gold, like Marth, as it looks great. His worst is orange, only because it's basically just a worse version of the gold one. It doesn't look the worst on him, but it's the most pointless one here, so I think it's gonna have to be the worst choice. Brawl is up next, starting us off with Meta Knight. He got some really great costumes in this game, and I think I'm going to have to go with Galactonite being his best one, with Dark Meta Knight being a very close second. These are both super cool references, and they really sell it with changing up his mask. His other costumes are all pretty solid, however I think the green one is probably the least solid out of them. It doesn't even look that bad, it's just like the least solid, but it's still like a really good alt. Meta Knight definitely had some of the best. Pit is up next, and I think his best one is blue, mostly just because it looks nice. His worst, though, is definitely the white one, as I really do not like this color of hair on Pit. I don't know why, just the yellow hair just doesn't really go well with him, so I don't like this one just because of his hair. Zerasu Samus's best is her white one, as, like the other ones where white's the best, it just looks good. Green is her worst, as I'm not a terribly huge fan of how these colors look with her. Wario's best is probably normal overalls, as it really should be his default alternate costume in my opinion. I know that they're trying to go with the whole WarioWare thing with the biker outfit, but I mean, the overalls are just so much more iconic. His worst is going to have to be the yellow biker one, as I don't really like the biker suit that much, and this is definitely the weakest of those. Ike's is simple. Best is swole, worst is pathetic baby. Moving on, I'm actually going to be splitting Pokemon Trainer into 4 parts. The trainer themselves, Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard, because each of them have varying different alts, and it's going to be hard to decide which one is best if I take them all as one package. So let's just split them up. The best Pokemon Trainer in my opinion is Red. He's my favorite Pokemon Trainer from all the games, so I'll always pick his default appearance. Now that's not to say Pokemon Trainers alts are bad, as they're far from it. They're all really good, referencing a different main character from a different game. As for his worst one though, I'm going to have to go with the one based off Lucas from Gen 4, as it's probably the lamest one all things considered. I don't really like Lucas as much as the other main protagonists anyways, so yeah, this is definitely the lamest. Squirtle's costumes are pretty lame, if I'm going to be honest. So his best one is going to be this green one, since it actually has a good origin being based off its shiny. Really, I think every Pokemon should have its shiny as an alt, as it's kind of dumb when they don't. It's like the most iconic different form of each Pokemon. Its worst alt is slightly light green, as it's way too close to normal Squirtle. Ivysaur's alts are also pretty lame, and in fact have the same reasoning for Squirtle. The best is yellow one because it's his shiny, and his worst is the purple one for being a bit too similar to the normal costume. At least all of Charizard's alts are really good. I decided his best is purple being based off its original shiny, and it looks very nice. His worst was hard to decide, but I went with green as it just doesn't look as great as the other ones. Overall, the Trainer and Charizard have great alts, while Squirtle and Ivysaur are kinda lame. I'm not a huge fan of Diddy's alts, but I think his best is blue and his worst is yellow. I know it's based on Dixie Kong, and that's a pretty good reference, but like Pit, I don't like the yellow hair here. It just does not work well with Diddy. Lucas's best by far is Boney, because I just love doggos, and good boyos and girlos. His worst is Red for just being a slight bit too similar to his default one, but it's still an okay one. King Dedede's best has to be the monochrome one, It's just a really cool reference to the original look of the Game Boy, and it just looks good with it. His worst is probably light blue, but that one is still pretty solid. Olimar's costumes are kind of for me as well. It's cool that he has Alf, but I'm gonna have to say his best is red just because it looks good. And his worst is Alf's alt, based on Olimar, which is really stupid considering Alf is already an alternate costume to Olimar, so why would we reference Olimar again in his own costume set? I know this is technically based off of an older Olimar. It's just ridiculous that one of the costume slots is basically just like Olimar and Olimar. It just, I don't know, it's a bit ridiculous and just pointless. Moving on to this game's unlockable characters with Snake. His best is the one that's pretty much invisible. It's really cool and a bold decision that they decided to make a character have invisible parts. I don't know how they allowed that to pass or why, but yeah, it's probably his best one. I mean, it's really overpowered. His worst one is probably the black one, since it's the only one just to be a recolor and not a pattern change like the others. However, it's still pretty good. Sonic is up next, and wow, are his costumes terrible. You know how I said I was disappointed with Game & Watch for having 3 blue costumes? Try all 8. Sonic's best is between the dark blue and very light blue one, but I think the dark blue one takes it for basically just being black. It's like barely blue, so that one's the best one by far. His worst one could really be any of the other 5 alternative costumes though, but I'm going to be going with the orange rings as I feel like that's the lamest of the 5. Lucario also has some of the worst alts. Hooray! Gray is best one for looking pretty cool all around, and his worst one is this green and pink one for being just like the worst color combination, and it just looks awful. Rob has some pretty good costumes and is actually the only character in the game to have a different default costume depending on where you live, which is really cool. Despite that though, I'm going to be going with this red one being the best, because I really like how it's a reference to the Virtual Boy, which is pretty funny. The light blue one is going to be my choice for the worst, purely based on looks. I also feel this other blue alt does its job a little bit better than the light blue one, but it's still good regardless. For Toon Link, I'm going to have to go with Dark Link. It's a costume all the Links have. I like it best here though, and the other Links all have a costume that's better than their dark counterparts in my opinion, which is why I decided to save Dark Link for Toon Link. For his worst, I'm going to go with his brown one, as it's a bit of a fusion between his default one and his last costume, and I feel like you should probably just go with one or the other instead of going for this middle ground that barely looks different from the last one. All the wolves are pretty solid, so for his best I chose his blue, and his worst is orange, only because it's the only one without an origin, but it's still pretty good. I would say all of wolves are pretty much on the same level. Okay, we're now on to Smash 4's starting roster. For this one I'll be using the 3DS version of the starting roster as it provides a more even split. Starting off with Villager, who's got some pretty good alts of his own. My favorite one though is the one with the yellow shirt, as the hairstyle is the same one I used in New Leaf, and I also like the yellow shirt best. And for his worst we have Mega Man's best is red and white because it's similar to his Doggo Rush, and like I said, doggos are the best. His worst is this green and yellow one. It's still good, but just a bit meh. Wii Fit trainers are all pretty equal, all solid, pretty much all on the same level, so really the best and the worst one could honestly just be swapped with each other. So I just picked that the best one is the green, and the worst one is the yellow one. Little Mac's best one has to be his pink hoodie. I love the reference, and it's just pretty cool to fight in if I'm being honest. His worst is the brown hair one since, like Bowser, it only changes the hair, pretty much, and it doesn't even look that great. I also just want to say that the wireframe ones are super scary. Moving on to Greninja, his black ult, which is loosely based on his shiny, is easily the best. Like Sheik, black works very well with the whole ninja aesthetic, and works well with Greninja as a whole. The worst one though is this pink one. It's a decent reference to Lickitung, but I don't really like that Pokemon anyway, and it's way too bright. My favorite Palutena ult is the red one, as it's just a great color scheme, and her black one is the worst for being a bit too similar to this purple one, and of the two, this has a much weaker origin, being based off of Dark Pit, who's already playable. Pac-Man is another character with just awful alts, with his main body not even changing a single shade. His best one is the Oven Mitts one, as it's a funny little design, and it's the only one to really change the pattern on the gloves and also the shoes. His worst is definitely the red one, as it changes him by far the least, and it's the only one to not change his shoe in any way, which is really strange. Robin's a character with pretty solid alts. My favorite is the white one, not only for its design, but the fact it's actually a reference to a different game franchise, being based off the mage from Final Fantasy. I love it when costumes reference other series. There aren't that many, but it's still really fun when there are. His worst is definitely the blue one, because Lord help us, we do not need any more blue-haired Fire Emblem characters. Shulk is up next, and for his best... I mean, do I even have to explain? For his worst, I picked this orange one, as his hair just does not look good here. I see that a lot with the Shulk costumes. That's kind of a general opinion I see a lot of people share. I kind of wish they just stuck with the yellow hair that he has in Smash 4 and his normal costumes. Hey, wait, aren't I forgetting someone? Not forgetting anyone important. Alright, onto our smallest segment of the 12 for this video, we have the Smash 4 Unlockables with a whopping 2 characters. Bowser Jrs Altar, absolutely incredible. He is the only character in the whole game to represent 8 different characters in his alternate costumes, being himself and the 7 Koopalings. Each of them get unique voice clips and announcer clips as well. On top of that, the 7 Koopalings are all major characters in the Mario series, and they make decent sense to go with Bowser Jr. here. The only thing that's kinda iffy about them being with Bowser Jr. is that they share Shadow Mario as a final Smash, which really only makes sense with Bowser Jr., but I can accept that. But as for the best, it's gotta be my boy Ludwig. He's always been my favorite Koopaling. Now the worst one is probably Iggy, but not because he's my least favorite or anything. So to make these characters work, they have to have each character have the exact same bone structure and general size as Bowser Jr., so that they can have the same hurtbox and animations. All of the other characters work, but since Iggy is quite a bit taller than the others normally, he looks a bit off. Still happy he's here, and Bowser Jr. has just got some of the best costumes in the game. Then there's Duck Hunt, who's got good costumes. They decided to go with a different approach here, making each costume based off a different dog breed. I like this one best as it reminds me of my boy Butch from Animal Crossing, and this yellow one is just a bit too bright, making it my least favorite, although, like I said, doggos are the best, so all of them are good. Next up, we've got our Smash 4 DLC fighters. Starting us off with Ryu, we've got my favorite being the black one, as it's a really cool color scheme. His worst is the cyan one, as I feel it's a bit too similar to his default look. Cloud is up next, and wait, Cloud has ults? Seriously though, some of these you can barely tell a difference, and even when I was looking them up for this video, it took me a minute to find some of these differences. His best is his first Advent Children one, as it's a model change and a good reference as well. Now honestly, pretty much of the rest can be considered the worst, except maybe this red one, because at least you can tell that there's a difference. But I'm choosing the sleeveless Advent Children one as the worst. It actually took me so long to figure out what the difference was for this, and it's not even a good change, so it's basically among one of the worst costumes in Ultimate. Corrin is up, and I think their orange one is the best, because the color scheme isn't terrible, and the worst is default, because Corrin is just so incredibly boring. Maybe my anti-Fire Emblem and Smash bias is tingling, but man is his default design awful. Unlike Jigglypuff and Pichu, his default one isn't the worst one because the other ones are great and anything. It's just that all of them are below average, and his normal one is just so boring, so it takes colors to make him at least a little bit interesting. Mini rant over, let's take a look at Bayo. Her best is orange since the colors are my favorite, and her worst is green because I'm not really a huge fan of the Bayonetta 1 design, and this one is certainly the weakest of that group. Next up onto our final game, Smash Ultimate. Inkling's best is purple because safety first. And their worst is cyan because they're a nerd. Ridley's best has to be the gray Mecha Ridley. I mean, it just looks so cool. The worst is probably this blue one. It's kind of just a sadder version of the default appearance, and unlike the other one close to his default look, it just doesn't look as nice. Simon's best is purple as it's a nice color scheme, and the worst is blue as it's just so horrifically ugly. KK Rool has got to be the albino boy for the best, and for the worst I'm going to say yellow. Even though it's pretty good, it's probably just the lamest out of all of his pretty good costumes. Isabelle is our second doggo of the video, and I think her best one is her blue one. As the color scheme is really nice, even if it may be a reference to Zipper T Bunny, who I absolutely hate for completely polluting my town full of eggs. Thank goodness they released that patch. Her worst is this purple alt, as it's way too similar to her pink alt, which is based off her casual clothing. Okay, now Incineroar's best is absolutely incredible. He has an alternate costume based off of Big the Cat from Sonic. How could that not be his best one? It's a perfect and hilarious reference. His worst is probably this black one, only because it's a lamer version of this dark gray one in my opinion. Incineroar has some pretty good ults all around though. Alright, now into the Echo Fighters. Starting us off, we have Dark Samus, with her best being gray and her worst being green, purely because of how good or bad they look. Daisy's best is white, and it's also got a little fun fact that the artwork is actually wrong, as instead of her tiara being gold as pictured here, it's actually silver. I mentioned this in my Smash Bros. Inaccuracies video, so make sure to go check that out. Her worst is pink, as it's a bit too close to Princess Peach in my opinion. Lucina's best costume is her one based off of Tiki, as they really went all out on the reference here, which is really good, especially with her hair color. Her worst is this gray one, as it's basically the same as her red alt with the hair, but they didn't go all out with her armor. For Chrom, his best is white since it looks nice on him, and his worst is black since it doesn't have an origin and it's a bit too close to the purple one. Dark Pit's best one is his brown one as it just looks the best, and green is his worst since it doesn't look good. Ken's up next, and like Ryu, I decided that his best one was the dark alt because it has a good color scheme. It also changes his skin color slightly, which is cool. I chose his gray one as his worst because it's just basically a worse version of the dark one. Finally, Richter's best is the yellow one since I like the colors, and his worst is this. Now, no, it's not the default one, but it's probably the closest alt in the game to its original color. If you can't tell, the inside of the collar changes to white. The only good thing about this costume is that it gives me hope that when Steve gets added to Smash, he could have a Herobrine skin, despite it being so close to Steve's normal look. Other than that, this costume is trash. I'm about to go insane here, but we finally made it to our final segment, the DLC Fighters of Ultimate. This video will be releasing before any more of the Fighter Pass 2 characters drop, and I might make a video review on their costumes later on, but let's stick with our final 6. Piranha Plant's by far best one is the one based off the Bone Plant. This is of course because the Bone Plant is a variation of our boy Dry Bones, who's been snubbed from the roster. At least Piranha Plant is doing his best to represent our boy Dry Bones. Dry Bones for Smash. His worst one is this pink one though, because it's similar to the purple one, which I like better. Speaking of purple, controversial opinion, but Joker's best alt is his purple one, as with the name and color of the clothing he reminds me of. My least favorite is this one. I know it's a pretty good reference, I'm just not a fan of the color scheme on Joker. Still a good costume though. Hero's best is the default one, so I just like the Luminary the best. My least favorite is Solo, but he's still pretty good. Hero definitely has the best costumes out of the first Fighters Pass, representing 4 different characters, which is huge. Banjo's best has to be the one based off Gruntilda, as it drastically changes how they look in a good way, and is a good reference to an important character from their series. Their worst is the red one, since Banjo doesn't change much. Terry's best is his yellow one, as he has a wolf on his hat, which is close enough to a doggo, so I approve. His worst is his brown one, as it kinda just looks like a sadder version of his default colors. Finally, Violet's best is the one based off Cloud because I like his design best, even though I don't play Fire Emblem, and their worst is his female one with green hair, as it's way too close to the other female one with green hair, referencing Sophis. Sophis? I don't know. Phew, we finally made it through all of the characters. I'm going to super quickly go through my top 5 characters with the best overall costumes and the ones with the worst, but I'm going to go very quickly. First off, we have Jigglypuff at number 5, and yes, I do think she has one of the best ones. I asked my Discord and they said that hers are awful, but I think they're great. Because they're all model changes, and yes, Jigglypuff doesn't change color, but that's not really an issue since all of the hats are clearly distinct, and you can easily tell who is who. Each of these hats are good references to the Pokemon series, and each one of them fit Jigglypuff very well. I especially like the Sleepy Hat one, even though it might not be a Pokemon one, but instead a Kirby hat. I don't actually know why many people don't like her costumes. I'm guessing it is because she barely changes color, but I don't really think that's an issue. I definitely think Jigglypuff's hats are good enough. Number 4, the Pokemon Trainer pretty much has all of the generations of their alts, aside from Sword and Shield, which is good. They could have maybe went farther with the idea making each trainer have a new model, but nonetheless it's really good. It would have been so cool to have all of the different trainers as a different model, and it would have definitely been possible for them to do, but I understand why they didn't go this far, maybe for the next Smash game. Number 3 is Mario, with his new costumes being the Builder and Wedding outfit, come from incredible games being Mario Maker and Mario Odyssey, and they're also model swaps as well. Along with those, Mario looks great in pretty much any combination of colors, whether it be purple, black and white, or even this really cool golf outfit. Even his worst one looks great on him, so he has to take this spot. Hero got by far the best treatment from the DLC fighters thus far, which is surprising considering how Square's other character went. He basically brought over 4 completely different iconic characters, which is incredible for the fans of the Dragon Quest series. I might not be one myself, but I'd be a fool to overlook his costumes for that reason. With him representing 4 characters in one slot, that's more than all of the other characters. Well, everyone besides, yeah, Bowser Jr. is number 1. His alts are the best by far. representing 8 completely different and important characters. There's absolutely no way he can't be number 1. Each character got new voice clips and even names and announcer calls. Even if one of them may be a slight bit messily put together, this is still an extremely good package of iconic Mario characters that make it impossible for it not to be the number 1 spot. I mean, all of these characters are good to where anyone could be anyone's favorite and anyone could be anyone's least favorite, but honestly, they're all great. I'm actually surprised they went this far, so yeah, Bowser Jr. has the best ones. I also wanted to say honorable mentions to Pichu, Villager, Inkling, Joker, and Meta Knight. They each have great costumes, however, I don't feel like they cracked the top 5. But now let's move on to the characters with the absolute worst overall alts. Spots number 5 and 4 were very hard to come up with, so I wouldn't be surprised if you all disagree with them. Corrin is already a boring character enough, and honestly his alts don't do that much to make him better. And it's mostly because of Corrin's just normal design that he's on here. Like, honestly, maybe number 6, the honorable mention, has worst alts, but I like their overall design better than Corrin's, which is why Corrin has to take this spot. Bayonetta's costumes are all pretty underwhelming, and like Corrin, I don't really like half of them, being the ones from Bayonetta 1. Bayonetta, Corrin, and the honorable mention are all pretty much tied, though. Now let's get into the 3 characters that I actually have at least passionate feelings about. Sonic's are just as disappointing as his moveset, being basically all shades of blue, which is really sad for a character that could work great with so many different colors. The only reason this is only number 5 is because of the black ult, which is different enough. Sonic's ults could really be just any color, and it's really disappointing that they're all blue. However, I definitely feel like this is from Sega, and not from Nintendo. I feel like Nintendo probably would have given him a few more references if they could. Pac-Man's ults are probably even more disappointing, with him not even changing a single shade like Sonic. These all reek with lost potential, and are overall such lame color swaps for one of gaming's most iconic characters. The only one that's like kind of acceptable is the Oven Mitts one, but other than that, these are all terrible. Cloud's costumes barely change at all, and are nearly impossible to tell the difference between them, especially during gameplay. At least you could tell for the other characters what their change is, but for nearly all of Cloud's ults, it's hard to see. For that reason, he easily takes the number 1 spot for me for the worst character overall for alts. For our honorable mention, Lucario barely didn't make this list. His gray ult really saved him here, and I do like Lucario's overall design a bit better than Corrin and Bayonetta's, so that's why he was safe. Now, one last thing before wrapping up this video, I actually took a poll for your all's thoughts on who had the best and worst costumes. Everyone voted for the top 3, with each spot being worth a different point value, with first being worth 3, second being worth 2, and third being worth 1. And whoever had the most points won the category. Here's a tier list of how the characters performed on the best list. Do keep in mind that this was a very small sample size, and a much bigger sample size should be taken for this to be more accurate. I decided to leave the links to both of the polls in the comments, so we could get a more accurate judgment of how you all feel. So please vote on it if you have the time. The worst one pretty much had what I expected, with Sonic, Pac-Man, and Cloud taking huge leads, and the others kind of mostly being mixed. However, there were a few interesting things of note about the best tier list. I was surprised at how well Piranha Plant, Byleth, and Link did, because I didn't really think they'd be that high. I also thought it was funny to point out that Fox, Marth, Roy, Dark Pit, King Dedede, Ryu, Ken, and Richter were the only characters that didn't get voted for in any of the categories. Like I said, the sample size was under 100 people, so I wanted to see if we could possibly get more accurate lists going, so please check the pinned comments for the polls. But anyways, that's it for this video. Is there any costumes you think I overlooked? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more on Smash Ultimate and anything Nintendo Switch. This is by far my longest one of these edited videos, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all did too. So please, if you've made it this far, drop a like. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.